name's Liam Smith, and today I'm going to show you how to paint the supply crates and barrels from the Munitorum kit for Warhammer 40k. Now, if you don't already have it, it's a pretty simple kit to put together. Really, the only construction that's needed for this part is to glue the two halves of the barrels together, as such. And these, if you wanted to, they're hollow in the bottom, but you're more than welcome to go and grab a sheet of styrene and cover up that hole if you want to make it a solid box. At the end of the day, if you're using it for wargaming terrain or for a display, let's be honest with each other, more than likely it's going to be sitting down on the ground facing downwards. But if you want to have it facing up, you know, kind of to show like a supply drop, you're more than welcome just to grab a thin sheet of styrene and cover it up, prime it, just how you would the rest of the model, and paint it the same way. Now, what you're going to want to start off with is Mechanicus Standard Gray. So that's going to be the actual crate parts. So if you're looking at it, it's going to be along here. Basically everything except for your hinges, your Aquila, and the top of the box. You could keep the top of the box as Mechanicus Standard Gray if you want. I chose not to. Adds a little bit of color and drastic change to the actual set. So that's what you're going to want to do if you haven't already. I primed mine using Citadel's Chaos Black. You can also use the Krylon Matte Black. I wouldn't recommend the Gloss Black for this, but if you so choose, you can go along with that path as well. It's a pretty straightforward kit. If you don't know how to use a Games Workshop paint, or any paint, and you're new to figure painting, and you pick this up to be your first kit, what you got to do is, as has been told by anybody who's ever watched Duncan Rhodes, you got to thin your paints. Now, some people like to go and thin them in the bottle. They'll transfer the paint over to a dropper bottle. This is especially popular with airbrush enthusiasts or anyone who uses an airbrush for most of their models. I, however, am going to focus on not using the airbrush for figures, but rather to kind of show you how to do the brushwork, because airbrushes aren't a cheap thing to buy when you start into the hobby. So using your base brush, because it's your base coat that you're going to do, you're going to grab a little bit of paint, just a little bit, put on your palette. Now you can buy a palette like this. Citadel also goes and produces basically a bunch of paper, like cardstock paper, that they do, and you can use that to kind of create a palette. You can create a wet palette, which I'll have a video up later of how to go and set up a wet palette. Really depends on what you want to do. What you're looking for is kind of a little bit above milk. Some people like to have it like a milky color. If you do it like that, which it's up to you, as it's your figure, your hobby, you're gonna have to do more than 2 coats. Don't worry if it doesn't go and if it doesn't cover it the first time or anything like that. That's basically bound to happen. If you can get it so that it covers the whole model and, you know, makes it look nice the first time, good on you. You've done something that many people can't do. Well, I should say, if you can do that and keep all the detail. Now, when you're looking at it, it's a pretty hard thing to go and deal with in terms of keeping the detail as well as getting the paint on. You'll see sometimes that, you know, there's a little bit extra on there. So all I do, just dab it a little bit, because I'll pick up the extra paint from the recesses, which is killing off your detail, and distribute it elsewhere. You're just going to do this until you go and you cover the model with paint and you can't see any of the Chaos Black underneath. It's key that you cover up all the Chaos Black, because even with the black model where I used Abaddon Black, which is the other Citadel Black paint, because Chaos Black used to be among their paint line with brush paints, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get a really weird color change. Uh, Using this as a base, it gives it a really nice matte kind of finish. Also goes and kind of makes the colors pop. Now, you don't have to use Citadel paints. I'm just using Citadel paints just because that's what I have around. Consequently, it's what I did to paint this kit the first time. So it's what I know best. If you're using Vallejo and you've done models before, you're more than welcome to use Vallejo. I can post up on my commission website. I'll have a conversion chart, because every single Citadel paint is more or less equivalent to one of Vallejo's paints. And it's a little bit cheaper to buy Vallejo. Everybody has their own personal wants. A lot of people like Citadel paints. I use both. I also use a numerous number of others paint products, so it really kind of depends what you like. Some people want it done and they say it with a specific color for commission, so I have to pick up specific colors, which I know I just made that sound like it's the end of the world, but really it's not when it comes to paint. I have at least 200 different types of paint sitting around the house, so don't be too worried. If you're worried about getting the paint on your hands, which is going to happen eventually whether you like it or not, what you can do is kind of paint this in stages, so that when one part dries, you go and paint that part. Now, as you can see, it's pretty well done. It's all covered, can't see any black seeping through, and you just gotta let it dry. Now, every paint takes a different amount of time to dry. I think the quickest to dry out of all the types of paint and such would be inks. Inks dry fairly quick. That being said, you leave this for a couple minutes and it will be done. You don't have to worry about, it taking forever to go and actually finish up drying. More or less, when I'm painting a figure, most of the time, by the time I'm done one half of the figure, the other half's dry. Now, as we wait for that to dry, there's a long one as well. There's a short one and a long one. Same premise. Just brush it up with the Mechanicus Standard Gray. If you run out of paint, don't worry. You can always just grab more. Terrain and like scenery and such will always eat up your paint. Just because it's a lot of flat faces, very hard for you to go and kind of cover everything up. There's a lot of open space for you to miss with singular types of color. So for example, this kit, everything uses Mechanicus Standard Gray. So if you don't have a full bottle of Mechanicus Standard Gray and you're wondering if you're going to need to go and buy another bottle of Mechanicus Standard Gray, I'd just go for it. That, and also if you're buying any form of terrain or anything like that from Games Workshop, Mechanicus Standard Gray is one of the main colors that you use as a base. Of course, I didn't paint my my Aquila Stronghold as that with that, but it was a personal choice. I mean, everybody does what they want to do. Like I said, it's your model, it's your hobby. But this is the one that I found kind of looks the best. With the Aquila Strongpoint, I believe I used Lead Belcher, which gives it more of a metallic sheen, which really fits with it. You add a little bit of typhus corrosion and such. Really fits with the model. But that metallic sheen wouldn't fit here. Think about it, it's a crate that's dropped in the middle of a battlefield. If it's metallic and shiny, it ain't the grim dark world of 40k. The fact that anything's metallic and shiny just goes to show the greatness of the God Emperor. Or just the fact that Chaos hasn't gotten there yet and burnt the thing down. Depends on who you talk to and what faction you play. I say this because you might be buying this as a Xenos player, because the kit is actually a very cool kit. Beyond the rules for it, which I can go and kind of point it to you, that the rules for this it's kind of can go either way. I mean, depending on your dice rolls, it can be an amazing thing where you can obliterate your enemies, or it can kind of just be a meh. That being said, garrison the crates with one unit, and they can control all the guns and fire more than once at your enemies, which is kind of cool. I always like that part. If you're wondering if your paint's too thick, the best way to kind of tell is if you can see your brush strokes. If when the paint dries, you can see brush strokes, means it's too thick. A lot of the main argument behind buying airbrushes is always, oh, it will cover up all those, it'll cover up all the brush marks and everything. I know many good figure painters who go and they paint using only a brush. Not because they hate airbrushes, but because it's just what they choose to paint with. Now, just doing a quick look over, this is more or less dry. I'm going to just do one more small box, just because then I can give you another idea while I wait for the last one to finish drying. For those of you who are wondering how much of a pain it is to go and prime this, depends on how you're doing it. If you're using brush on primer, this kit won't be your friend. That being said, if you're using Chaos Black Primer, it's just time consuming and takes up a lot of primer. I primed 3 kits of scenery, and yeah, I'm probably about half a can of Chaos Black down. Now, like I said, you don't have to use Chaos Black. You can use Krylon, basically any other form of black primer. Black primer, you're just looking to kind of give it a black coat underneath that keeps the paint from peeling. There's Vallejo primer for airbrushes, if you're using an airbrush. Their airbrush primer is really good. I say this as I use it every once in a while for my airbrush, and I'm very happy with it. If you're new and want to get an airbrush for figure painting, I'm a strong fan of Badger. I personally would get a Badger 105 and a Sotar 2020. At the time of this video when it's uploaded, unfortunately the sale for Ken's 50th birthday will have already passed. But that was a great opportunity to kind of pick up an airbrush and really get a good deal for going and actually buying like your and supplying yourself with an airbrush. Alright, so more or less this bad boy's dry. I'm saying that because it's not getting on my fingers. You can also tell kind of by the fact that it's shiny. If it's shiny, it means it's still not dry. Generally, the whole thing should dry more or less around the same time. So, for this one, we're going to paint it with a, we're going to paint this one green, the top of the box. So we're going to go with a, with Caliban green. I'm pretty sure, this is the current name for the paint. I'm saying that for those who are new to the hobby, I'm saying that because I have a couple old paint pots that use the old name, which unfortunately confuses a lot of people because nobody knows what some of those names mean. If you're using some of the old paints, maybe you got them from your father or you got them from a friend who used to be in the hobby or whatever it may be. Using some of the old paints and they haven't dried up because, you know, they're not Corax white. Or any of the other whites. Hate the whites from Citadel. I will go and I'll have a conversion chart from Games Workshop posted up to show you the changes in names. Because it's the same paint, more or less. I think they changed only a few paints. And there's only a couple paints that actually don't have a replacement. So, if you have those paints that don't have a replacement, be happy because people usually complain that those paints don't exist. Or that they're not the same. I think if I remember correctly, Caliban green was originally called Dark Angel's green. I could totally be wrong, but I'm gonna just hope that I'm right. Now, this one, it's not like when you're going and you're doing the base coat where you can kind of just slop it around and throw on the brush wherever you want. You're gonna cover up everything on the top. You can even get it on the Aquila. Don't worry, because you're gonna cover it up. And trust me when I tell you this, the paint that you're using to cover it up, it's gonna cover up really well. You won't even be able to tell. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can paint the top, all of it, including the Aquila. You could also avoid painting the Aquila if you're really worried about the color bleed. And you can avoid the edges, which if you get paint on the edges, don't worry. It's not the end of the world. You're gonna, no matter what I've learned is, unless you got the world's most stable hands, you're gonna have to go back and do a quick touch-up, and that will, cover up the paint that you by accident put in the wrong spot, or, a little bit of bleed over, or whatever it may be. You go and you can leave the edges. I'm leaving the edges for this one to kind of show the comparison between this one and a set of boxes I already have painted. Now, if you're concerned about how it will look, your main goal is kind of just to go and give it that nice pop of green. I mean, it's a colorful thing. If you're concerned that this is really light, it's because the gray is still shining through. Only reason why I know that is because I'm looking at the my other one. Also, the light is pretty tough. When it dries, it sometimes gives it a bit of a different color, but more or less, this is what you want it to look like. To give you an idea of the difference, that's the difference. As you can see, as it's starting to dry, colors are starting to kind of come a little bit closer to the original piece that I used. Now, if your piece doesn't look exactly like how I have it, don't worry. It's okay, every piece is different, and you gotta think about how many of these crates the Manufactorums put out. Because, the Imperiums, like the Russians in the Cold War, they kind of left everything behind when they went and they retreated back to the Soviet Union. Because they just have so much shit. But that's more or less painted. Now you can paint your long crate, your other short crate, you can paint it green. Or, you don't have to paint it Caliban green, you can paint it other forms of green. You could paint it Mephiston red. You could paint it corn red. If you're really wanting to get kind of crazy, you could even do Wild Rider red, which is kind of like a reddish orange. Mephiston red's the one I use because I use corn red a lot for other models, and Mephiston red I rarely use, and I just, over the years, kind of collected a few pots of it. So I like to use it whenever I can. It also has a little bit of a different color property. To give you an idea, I think I have a thing of corn red laying around. I should, because I was just painting corn models not that long ago. To give you an idea, corn red's a little bit darker. It has a little bit more of a purplish tinge. Versus your Mephiston red, which is a lot more whole body of a red. It's kind of along that line of, kind of like a blood red for when you were a kid and you had your crayons and stuff. That's how it is. Now, I'm not going to use corn red because it's an Imperium kit and I'd feel terrible if I used corn red. And B, it's got that purplish tinge to it that I don't want to use for this. I don't want to use that to go and kind of paint this color because the purplish tinge is just going to get lost. Caliban green is about the darkest you're going to want to get other than a straight black. I'm saying that because as much as, you know, the silver does pop really well, still have to finish touching up this one, but the silver, like, your, not silver, but your, what's it called? The Balthazar Gold, it pops really well with this. Don't get me wrong, it pops really well. But the problem is that purple is kind of, it's not a color that goes and cooperates very well and brings out the contrast. Just because of the mixing of colors. You'll kind of learn to pick that up as time goes on. You may think that it's a good pick, that's your personal choice. For those of you who are ultramarine players, there's also this. Other reason why I kind of picked that color over corn is because if you look at it, I kind of tried to go along with colors for Space Marine chapters. I was going to paint the red box that I have here. I was going to paint that one to be like a yellow. Then I kind of went against it as I realized I was putting bronze on there and it would be a really, really bad color contrast. You wouldn't get the same pop as you would from red. Now, to give you an idea, so that you can pick whatever one you want. For your green, I used Caliban Green. For your red, I used Mephiston Red. When it comes to going and doing the actual metal bits of it, use Mechanicus Standard Gray. When it comes to the blue, I used McCragg Blue. Not Guilliman Blue, which is the glaze, or Ultramarines Blue, which is a completely different color, but McCragg Blue. And then last but not least for the black, I used Abaddon Black. Now kind of fast forwarding, I'm going to go and steal the this green box. You can go and use a couple of different shade paints. I have a couple just sitting on my desk right now. So, I have your Dracoff Nightshade, which you're not going to want to use for this. This is more of a blue color, so, you know, Ultramarines or anything that has a lot of fucking blue in it, you're going to use that. Now, Nuln Oil and Reikland Flesh Shade are what you're going to want to look for. You're going to go and you're going to use this. So what you're going to do is for the top, shake it up just a little bit. You kind of get into the, just to get you into the habit of doing it. You don't always have to do it with this. But go. And I have I recently bought this. I have a shade brush, which I'm not going to use for this because that's bigger of a brush than I thought it was. Yeah, I bought the large shade brush. That's why. So instead, I'm going to use my base brush because that's going to give me enough coverage. For those of you who are kind of wondering why I'm using two different shade paints, there's a reason behind it. The Nuln Oil will bring out the color really nicely. So you kind of get an idea. Now, for those of you who don't know, Nuln Oil is very, very, very watered down, as it's a shade paint. So you don't need to worry so much about thinning it, but more so getting it off your brush. So all you're going to do, just give a couple brushes over. As you can see, it's already adding that next level kind of feeling to it, where it's got that kind of old feel. Now with this, you're going to want to try to make sure that you don't have any left in the recesses of the Aquila, which is where it will sit, as well as on the edges of the pillars. Right there. Now if you have it like this, you can paint along the sides with it if you want. I'm going to probably go over this with something else other than this brush, but you can go and cover up with this if this is how you choose to do it, versus the method that I showed for the other green box where I only did the inside and left the outside with the Mechanicus Standard Gray. Now you're going to go and you're going to cover up like that. And as you can see, it already looks 1,000 times better than before. It's got that nice color pop. Doesn't look bright and shiny. It adds a little bit of that grimdark feeling. If you think that it's only with green that it works, I can do it with all of them. Here's the red. I'm using the red because it's a brighter color. And you'll watch as it gets it's darker, it gets a lot more grimdark, more 40K of a 40K feeling to it, versus I'm going to the park to go and eat sandwiches with Grandpa. Now, if you do pick up too much, just wipe it off on the sides of your paint palette. Dab it along to kind of pick up more, because your brush will always have more saturation than you think it does. Just make sure you kind of cover everything up. Dab it along to pick up any excess. And that's how it looks. Even with the black. Now the black I find is probably the biggest stark one for change. I love how black looks when you brush it with Nuln Oil. Just the whole pop of this one color. By far the best thing that you'll get. You know, the other ones it kind of tones it down, but this one, because it goes and adds that little bit of depth to the Abaddon black, makes your Aquila pop. As much as it's now got that burnished kind of bronze feeling to it, it's now also amazingly well colored. If you're wondering why I'm not going and doing the bottom, that's the next stage. So go rinse off your brush. If you haven't been doing that, you need to make sure that you're rinsing off your brush every time, otherwise you're going to mix the colors. If you're really picky, you can pick up more brushes. There's people I know that buy hundreds of brushes. They aren't the best quality, but they work. So that's all you need to do with the Nuln Oil. I'm not going to do the Macragge Blue just because I want to try to get this done a little bit quicker for you guys. Now the next one that you're going to do is your Reikland Flesh Shade. You can only use a little bit of this because it's going to be the complementary to your next part. I gotta love it when you have so many different colors in the palette. You're gonna go and you're gonna your Reikland Flesh Shade right on the bottom of the box. Now this part is the best part. You don't have to be perfect with it, because all it is showing the dirtying up. Maybe this side has a little bit more dirt coming up. If you by accident hit the top, it's not a big deal, because guess what? Sometimes dirt's going to hit the top. And like that, you have tons of dirt sitting around, making the model look a little bit dirtier. Which I'm sure anybody who plays Nurgle is happy beyond all belief that I've done that. I mean, I play Nurgle and I'm kind of happy about it. Alright, so now you've got that stage done, where you've now got kind of like that residual dirt. So the next stage of what you're going to want to do, I do it for weathering for all of my miniatures when it comes to the bottom of it. You're going to want to go, and if you don't already have this, it's a beautiful paint to own. It's called Typhus Corrosion. I don't say that because I play Death Guard. I say that because it's actually really nice paint. Comes really nice together, adds a little bit of that old feeling. Now this stuff, you're only going to want to use on the bottom. So you're going to use your layer brush or your detail brush, whatever you want to use. Detail brushes are always the best ones to use, but if you don't have one, you can always use a layer brush like I'm doing here. This is a medium layer brush. I'd get a small layer brush if I was you. So, just wipe it off a little bit. we're going to go and we're going to do up this box here. You're just going to want to do a little creeping up here. Along the sides. Just kind of giving that nice coverage, because it's a texture paint, so it's going to go and add something else to it. Adds a little bit of that grime dirt feel while actually adding it onto the model. Now, to give you kind of an idea, when it comes to this, all you got to worry about is dealing with that. That is all you have to deal with the containers for your supply crates. Alright, sorry for that weird cut. The camera fell, and then there's a huge kerfuffle with trying to fix that. So through the power of editing, you get to avoid that part. But as I was saying, the only thing else that you can do, if you're really, really worried about it, how having that kind of dirty earth feeling, is you can add a little bit of a Grelin earth. I use this to kind of put on the bottom of my Aquila strong point hold, or whatever, strong point, or whatever you want to call it. And as you can see, kind of adds that mud. Now, this, I'm going to have it so that, you know, these haven't been sitting in the mud for ages. And they just have that typhus corrosion of, you know, some dirt got kicked up on it and stuff like that. You don't have to cover the entire thing with typhus corrosion. You don't have to waste the paint. So, that's everything for the containers. Alright, that's everything for today's video. Next video is going to show you how to paint those barrels that they have in the kit. Following that, we're going to have the containers and an overview of the whole kit once it's completed. Should you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, and please subscribe. When you subscribe, you'll be able to see the next steps and all of our new content being put up at least once or twice a week. Thank you, and have a good day.